Sacre bleu, she's so beautiful! Well, why don't you go talk to her? But what would I say? I don't know, whir, rat-a-tat-tat? Oh, come on, I'm sure all the men say that to her. Actually, I think you might be surprised. I think that whole 3-round burst thing is a little bit more rare than you think. Do you think she would go for it? It's worth a try. Alright, I'm going in. Pardonnez-moi, but I just wanted to say... It was love at first rat-a-tat-tat. Welcome back, I'm Captain Xavier, and my monthly build this month is going to be this Stryfe. I decided I'm going to go ahead and upgrade this thing to the absolute max, or at least as far as I want to go, just because it was such an amazing cosmetic build that I got from Armory, and then I got a whole bunch of other parts that are going to be going into this, and it should be pretty wicked when it's all together. So, what all is going to be going into this, we have the version 6 Select Fire kit from Lytake that they sent me, which has a whole bunch of new features that I am still not fully up to speed on. I'm still trying to find the instructions in English. Currently I have them in Chinese, and hopefully that's good enough for me to figure out how this thing goes together. But it has a lot of additional features, like I said, that I'm pretty sure I'm going to need instructions for. So I will keep digging. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, I hope. I also have the Bulldog wheels that were given to me by FoamBlast. Their links will be in the description. And I got a Morpheus cage from Out of Darts with the metal guide. And then I have the Fang revamp motors that I got from FoamBlast. And that's what's going in this thing. It's all going to be run on a 2S LiPo. And hopefully it behaves itself. I do then have a thumb screw for the jam door, or for the battery door. The battery door is going to be getting replaced. Both of my printers are currently busy, but first thing tomorrow morning I'll be printing a new door for it, probably in light gray, and if I don't like how that looks, I'll paint it white. Cosmetically, the only thing I'm not absolutely in love with is this green stripe, but for now I'm going to leave that alone. I may do something about it in the future, sand it off, paint it, who knows. It will be getting an extended mag release, and that's probably about it for additional stuff. Doesn't need things like a voltmeter because there's nowhere to put it with this kit. Plus, I think it may have it built in. I think it also has essentially an ammo counter built in, kind of. Rather than counting down, it counts up. But we'll see. Anyway, let's get this thing apart and get to it, because I am excited. Okay, motors and wheels are in. Now let's take a look at the instructions some more. Alright, I was finally able to find the instructions in English, or rather, I was given the instructions by Valour, who is awesome. The link will be in the description. At least I hope the link will be in the description. I hope it's a link that I can provide. If not, there'll be an excuse in the description and a link to the Chinese version. But it's a good thing that I found it, because this thing is way more complicated and has way more features than I ever imagined. And I never would have figured them out by randomly pushing buttons, because I wasn't even pushing the right buttons. I didn't even realize the buttons that I was pushing were the kinds of buttons that they were. But we will get into all of that in a little bit. Right now, I'm actually going to disassemble this so that I can reassemble it in a nice, organized fashion for you guys. And I will explain the various features as I go. So we're actually going to start with the far side of the blaster. There are two items here. There is the selector switch, which you'll see I have painted white to better match the motif. I do probably still need to glue it in place. Yep, definitely need to glue it in place. But I need to make sure that it's in the right position first. So, that is there. There is then the other half of the dart sensor. So this blaster has a feature where if the magazine is empty, the blaster won't function. And it uses this to detect whether or not there is a dart at the top of the magazine. So this is one half of it, and then the other half is on the plate that is also the wire channel cover for the flywheels as well as this part. So this cable comes across and attaches onto the other side. And the one downside to the positioning of this is that the Morpheus guide that I got from Out of Darts was long enough that it interfered with that. And I could either have tried to drill a hole through the guide or Dremel it. I ended up just cutting it off a little short, and I hope that doesn't have a particularly negative effect on the performance of the flywheel cage. It didn't appear to, but we will see when we actually get to the firing demos. Yeah, so that is all nifty. It screws in using... It comes with its own screws. Do not try to use the original screws, or you'll do what I did and nearly punch a hole through the far side of the shell. You then have this plate, which is apparently the main board. It has what I believe is a volt regulator or a capacitor or a resistor of some kind, all sorts of little chips and sockets. This socket, I never did figure out what it is for. I don't know if it is left over from experimentation, if it is for additional features that they haven't quite added yet, or what. But it doesn't seem to go anywhere. This is where the Select Fire kit plugs in, and this goes over... the area that was originally the magazine detector, the mag lock, which is nifty. And then the final, and then also plugged into that is the display board. Now this is a whole combination of things which I will demonstrate when we actually, once I get it all put together, and I will show you how all the features that are up here, which is way more features than I was expecting. But then we have this board, and hopefully I can show it off well enough. This kit is designed to not require soldering at all. The flywheel cage, if you upgraded the motors, you would need to solder those, but you don't need to solder anything in this kit at all, which was very, very impressive. Not even the battery and the motor leads, because they actually screw in. They're held in by these two clamps, which are screwed in, and they actually provide you with the tiny screwdriver necessary to tighten those. And then there are at least two MOSFETs in this system. One that controls the pusher motor, and one that controls the flywheels. So it is, you can use a whole lot more power. Which again, we will go into once I put this together and I start talking about the various features as to which batteries you can use with this system. It does also then have an actual fuse. So if something goes horribly wrong, it will blow the fuse instead of your motors or the board, which is an amazingly cool feature to have. And with something this complicated and something that costs this much, that's a really, really good idea. There is then another socket here that just says wheel switch, and I don't know what it does. I don't know if it's left over from a previous iteration, or once again, if it is something that they decided not to use, or something that you may be able to add, because you can buy this without the display board or the kit, having just Select Fire. The other stuff is an add-on, as it were. You can get it without it, you can use it without it, or you can buy the whole advanced kit, which is only a few dollars more, so I highly recommend it. And they sent me the advanced kit, which is really, really cool. So, however you decide to wire up your battery, whether you decide to just have them come directly off the battery lead, because this can run off of IMRs or IFRs. They recommend IFRs, provided that your motors can take it. The kit is designed to run off up to 4 IFRs or IMRs. I went with LiPo, and it works just fine with LiPo as well. So, that is where all the parts go in. There's a couple of places that you have to Dremel out that I showed in... I attempted to show. I'll go ahead and show them again here just so I don't have to try to dig through my messy bit. The ridge that is normally right here has to be completely dremeled off in order to make room for both this capacitor on this plate and your pusher motor. So it either needs to be cut off or dremeled off entirely. You then need to also cut out a little bit right here in order to make room for parts of this board. So you need to cut out a little section right here, right above where the switch was. And then you also need to Dremel a little bit on the far side. The supports right here have to be removed in order to make room for, again, for the battery, or for the pusher motor on the far side. And I believe that is all of the... Oh, and last but not least, you have to cut a little slot right here to allow the cables that go into the battery housing. Though hypothetically, you could actually go through the top here instead of cutting down there, but it fits a little better if you cut it down there. So there is a little bit of cutting, though they show that you can do it with snips and a razor blade rather than needing a Dremel. They tried to make this as simple as possible. For drilling all the holes on this side, they actually provide you with sharpened screws that you can use to drill these holes. And then a really big one for drilling the main hole for the switch. So again, if you don't have a drill, you can build this. All you need is a screwdriver, a razor blade, and some snips are the only tools that you actually require to put this kit together, which is brilliant engineering, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and reassemble everything. They provide you with all the screws that you need, though you will need a regular Phillips screwdriver to actually provide that, or to secure things. It does not come with the Phillips screwdriver. It does come with the tiny screwdriver you need for connecting up certain things. They made it... Most of the sockets are unique, so you can't even plug things into the wrong spot or in the wrong way. The only exception to that is the display here and the sensor here use the same socket and are right next to each other. But they are labeled, and if you're not sure, the jam door display goes on the far left, closest to the jam door. So now, you may have noticed that there does not appear to be anything behind the Rev Trigger, and that is correct. They have replaced the Rev Trigger entirely with a dual stage trigger. So you see these two tiny little switches there, and they can get away with using tiny little switches because it's all actually powered with MOSFETs. The first one is your Rev Trigger. When you start pulling the trigger and that switch is released, it revs. And then when you go all the way, it then fires. And I have Fang revamps in here running on a 2S LiPo, and they don't quite spin up fast enough for me to be able to simply pull it in one long draw. You do need to give it just a second for it to rev up, but once it's revved, then you can snap off shots pretty quick. So that is pretty neat. The one thing I kind of wish they had was a 3D part that filled in the hole where the Rev Trigger used to be. I am just going to put the Rev Trigger in where it was, just so there isn't that gap. But that is almost always going to confuse me when I go to Rev, and I'm going to forget, and I'm going to pull the Rev Trigger, and nothing's going to happen. So this will be getting spliced in somewhere in the video. I've discovered yet another feature. There was a cable that plugged in that I couldn't figure... there was no mention of it in the instructions as to where it went. And it was the one piece in the whole thing that looked like it really needed to be soldered. Other than they did provide the wires for connecting the flywheel cage and connecting the battery if you wanted to. Or you could use stock ones and just splice them in. I ended up using them. But I figured it out. The one complaint that I kind of had with the blaster was that it didn't use the Rev Trigger. At first I thought that would be a neat feature, having it dual stage, but I quickly discovered that I kept hitting the Rev Trigger trying to rev and it didn't work, and then I'd pull the trigger, and kind of the neat thing about it, you know, dual stage trigger is that it's only the one trigger. The downside is that you have to practice to find out where the rev point is as opposed to the fire point, so that you don't let off too much and kill your revving. Whereas having a secondary one is, in fact, allows you to more readily control or easily control whether or not you're revving. And it turns out that that cable goes to that one jack that I couldn't figure out what it for that says wheel switch, which now, of course, makes perfect sense, is the rev switch. So you plug the cable in there, and then it just solders to the original existing rev switch, and you can have, you could keep the trigger lock in there if you wanted to, but you don't need to, because now that secondary stage acts as a failsafe, so that you can pull the trigger without pushing the rev trigger, but the gun will still rev, because it has that backup rev. So now, the rev trigger works whether the blaster is turned on or not. So that's kind of interesting. It's a complete bypass and just goes straight to activating the MOSFET, which I don't know what's going to happen when I actually do turn the blaster on. If that will get disabled the same way the switch in here gets disabled if you don't have it on. I suspect it does, but we're going to find out when we put it back together now. So yet another kudos to the designers for anticipating my every whim. Now, if they could just figure out how to make this thing more left-hand friendly, I would have no complaints at all. Okay, so I do have the detection in, so now pulling the trigger does not rev, but the rev trigger still revs. So the rev trigger is a complete bypass of the safety system, which I don't know if that's just, it was necessary with how they designed it, but I definitely like that they have that feature, so that if you put a magazine in, if you were to pull the trigger without revving, it will rev, which your first shot will probably be a little short, but subsequent shots will be fine. If you're going burst, by the time the second shot comes in, it should be fully up to speed. So that is really cool, and I'm glad I figured it out. And I wish it was in the instructions. So yeah, there is in fact a rev switch wire. Lovely. Now I'm not entirely sure if any of the aftermarket Stryfe triggers will work, because it does need to have this full front section here that used to interact with the magazine lock, and I'm not sure if the off-brand triggers have that, or if the metal triggers are going to give you any kind of a problem interacting with the circuit board right there. But the stock one works just fine. There is then another tiny switch right there on the bottom that interacts with your mag release. And it does a number of things, which I was not expecting, and which is what caused me some grief. But that switch gets pushed when you either when you put a magazine in or when you take a magazine out, that button gets pressed. So that is obviously important. When you go to put the two sides together, you first plug in the selector switch. Make sure that everything is lined up there, and then you can put the shell together. And then you can plug in the other half of the ammo detector. Lovely! Let's go shoot this thing. Alright, now for the firing demonstration. And as a reminder, this thing is running Fang revamps in a Morpheus cage with Bulldog wheels with a 2S LiPo. So let's see how well it actually performs. That's single shooting AccuFix. Let's try some burst. Pretty much the same performance with burst. What do we got? We've got 7 more rounds. Sure enough. All right. Net down. I killed it. I got him. He couldn't take it anymore. All right. Said it was some full auto. And a jam. Yeah, even full auto, it's getting the same performance. Gosh, that is awesome. Ah, oh. Few more darts. Alright, up next, we're going to be firing these black-orange dome tips that I love so much. I'm hoping we'll get some decent performance. We'll see what kind of numbers they get, starting with some single shots. Let's try some burst. And last but certainly not least, some full auto. All right, that's fantastic. I gotta go clean up the mess because some of the darts missed the net even at this range, and most of the darts bounced back out. Well, there you have it. The performance is absolutely magnificent. Everything that I was hoping to get out of this, and a whole lot more with all the features that the kit has. As well as the performance of those motors being able to churn out the exact same FPS pretty much within, a couple here and there at single fire and at full auto is very, very impressive. I'm well sold on the Fang revamps now and will probably use them in all sorts of things. Still like the Michelle 2 motors for a lot of things, but for this kind of application, I'm liking the Fangs. And definitely the wheels and the motor and the guide all seem to be working beautifully. I may end up putting in that anti-jam piece because I did have a couple of jams as a result, probably just because of worn darts, but also the fact that I had to shorten the guide may have in fact led to more jams. So I might try putting that anti-jam block in there. I'll probably have to cut it down the other way, but between the two I should get a fair amount of coverage for preventing jams. Everything else is working pretty much perfectly, and I love how it came together cosmetically. Still not sure about the stripe, but the fact that I really favor those green AccuFakes, I think it ends up going well with the green AccuFake in a clear magazine in this thing. I would like to get a Desolator magazine, just because I think it would look really pretty. Or if somebody could come up with a 3D printed file to put some sort of a cosmetic white part on the bottom of one of these magazines that may already exist and I just need to check Thingiverse, but that would be pretty nifty. Renee, if you're watching, look into that. That would be awesome. Anyway, yeah, I do have the thumb screw on here, which is lovely. And as you saw at the very beginning, this thing pairs with my Vector Stryfe very, very nicely. They're both select fire kits. The Stryfe is the previous iteration, but still performs well. I may end up swapping the motors on it, though, quite honestly. It's a lot louder, but not overly so. It's not nearly as loud as my my Stryfle, which is just horrifically noisy, but this one is somewhere in between. I might be able, there's probably ways that I can make it a little bit quieter, but it's definitely not too loud for my preference. If I wanted to get it quieter, I'd probably have to go to aluminum wheels, and I really like those Bulldog wheels in here, so I'm liking the performance that this one is getting. If you know some features about this kit that I have overlooked because the instructions are a little lacking. The fact that it doesn't make any mention of the Rev Trigger, as far as I could tell, is one issue. And that whole noise thing, I'm really pretty sure that it's supposed to reduce the power to the flywheels, but it didn't appear to when I adjusted it. So maybe I'm doing it wrong, or I'm misunderstanding what that means. Yeah, I definitely like how this came together. Now I just need to find an attractive woman around my age who's single and happens to like submachine guns. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Anyway, let me know what you think of this build. A lot of people thought I should leave it single auto. A lot of people thought I should go full auto. And then a couple of people wisely mentioned that I should go select fire. And since Lytake had sent me this kit without even mentioning it, that just seemed the way to go. Now, my only complaint is it's not terribly left-hand friendly, though I imagine this would probably fit just as well on the other side, and frankly, I think it would look better because it would not be sticking out. So you could put that on the other side if you're left-handed, or heck, you could put it on that side if you're right-handed, if you just wanted to adjust by looking to there instead of there, whichever you prefer. I'm gonna try that right now just because I want to see if it does in fact work. Oh no, it won't. Never mind. You would need to cut the bottom off of the jam door, which wouldn't be hard or bad, but I don't want to do that right now. But I do think this would fit better on that side and would make it slightly more left-hand friendly. I guess it'll depend on who ends up using this. If they're left-handed, I'll swap it over. If they're right-handed, I'll leave it where it is. I don't know how you would go about making this more left-hand friendly. Maybe making the selector up, here somewhere on either side, rather than for the thumb, have it for the index finger. But whatever. I like it. Let me know what you guys think of this. Let me know what you think of this build in general. Definitely check out Armory for, this is his cosmetic kit, and he's got a lot of stuff that he's working on, new stuff coming out. He recently revealed a new minigun design, which is amazing. And check out FoamBlast. They got me a lot of the parts that are in here. Check out Lytake and NF Strike for the parts that they provided me. Check out Out of Darts for the parts he provided me. A lot of different sources went into this build, so I'll have all of them down in the description if you guys want to try to build something like this yourselves. Let me know what you think about it, and as always, thank you guys for watching.